How to make an ocean wave porthole outdoor side table. Now, I had this porthole laying around in the backyard for years, decided to make a little outdoor side table by the pool out of it. And I came up with a pretty cool design. I wanted to do an epoxy resin ocean wave design on the top, and I made easy to make legs for it. And the legs are made out of a 2x3 and also 2x2 material, and they're slotted to fit the flange in the porthole. But if you don't have a porthole, you could make a round table or a square table and basically use the same leg design. You can see that they're tapered at the bottom. I just cut a 10-degree angle. There's a cross member going across that's bolted together. And at the top, each 2x2 is attached to the 2x3 with screws. And I also have some pocket screws or pocket holes for screws to attach the top later. So I started just by cutting the 2x3s to length, and that's going to depend on the size of your table. I also notched them so that they would fit inside each other and create an X, and then just secured that X together with a single screw going through the middle. Like I said before, I had to notch mine or put a groove in mine to accept the flange on the porthole, but if you're just going to do a round table, you don't need this step at all. That's just how the porthole flange rests inside that the groove. So now I'm going to work on the legs, and the legs are pretty simple. I went with 18 inches long. You have to cut a total of 8 of these. They have to be basically exactly the same. Each one gets cut with a 10-degree angle on the top and on the bottom, and you orient those cuts so that the legs get kicked out a little bit by the 10-degree flange, and then the surface is still flat. And if you noticed on here, I also marked where I want the cross member. I'm going to pre-drill that hole, and also where I'm going to put the screws up top to attach them to the 2x3. Once I drilled one hole through one of the legs, I kind of used that as my drill guide. I just lined it up with the next 2x2 and put a little mark, and then I could drill the remainder of the holes. The size of that hole is going to depend on the size of the bolts that you use. So now I've got all the legs done, 10-degree angle, pre-drilled holes top and bottom. I'm going to start the assembly. So I'm going to start just by putting one screw in the top of each, and then I'll get the table nice and level before I put the second screw in. For the cross members, I laid them in place and I drilled through the existing pre-drilled holes in the legs, right through that center cross member piece so that everything's in alignment. I also marked where I'm going to cut it off for the angle, so it'd be flush. And then when that was all done, I just bolted it all together. For the top, I started with plywood. I just cut a circle out of the plywood that would fit inside the porthole. Just confirming that it actually fits. And I'm going to use resin on this, but before I do that, I'm going to paint it. So I painted a sand color down at the bottom, for the beach, and I'm just going to use spray paint this to paint some blue water. Most of this you're not going to see. It's actually going to get covered up with resin, but it's a really good idea to pre-paint or to cover the wood with paint before using resin. It prevents any air from leaching out of the wood and creating little bubbles in the resin. So this is the sand area, which was just painted. And also, I put some blue for the water. But here's the resin. And like I said before, this is really going to cover everything. I used a dark blue up top, a little bit of a lighter blue below that. And I'm using a resin called Total Boat Maker Epoxy, which really works out well for these ocean waves. I spread out the dark and the light blue just with a paintbrush. And then if you want, you can add a little bit of green. I did. Sometimes I just use a lighter blue. Very important to add some clear, a good ½ inch onto the sand, because the white caps of the waves are going to flow over that clear. So you could pour on the white in a little line right on the edge of the clear, or I just like to use a little painter's artist paintbrush. Now the fun part of the project, you just use a hairdryer and you blow the white into and over the clear so it creates these little waves. And the heat from the dryer makes that resin form almost into the cell structure of the wave. So it really gives it a kind of a cool effect. Now notice that all of this resin is covering the water. If you look at the sand area, that's just the paint. So when I'm all done with these waves, I am going to give this whole tabletop a coating of a different resin, a very hard bar top type resin. For doing the waves, I also found it's nice to use a straw, or what I'm using is the inside of a Bic pen. And I let that dry for a full 24 hours. Once that was cured, I want to do the final step, which is going to be to coat this. And I used a different resin. This is called Industrial Clear, and it's made for outdoor use, UV protected, food safe, and it really becomes hard as a rock. It's a 2-part resin, 2-part resin, 1-part hardener. You mix it slowly for 5 minutes. I use a little butane torch to go over it very quickly. You don't want to add a lot of heat, but you just want to warm it up a little bit so that it thins out and the bubbles reach the surface and dissipate. You end up with a nice clear finished product. This is the finished product. I hope you enjoyed watching the video. If you did, I ask that you please subscribe and give us a like. And by all means, check us out on the web at DIYeasycrafts.com. I've got a whole bunch of nautical and epoxy resin projects, do-it-yourself projects on there. Thanks for watching.